And we are live again. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Grafana Campfire Community Call February edition. And we are back after some long time. Last time, I think what we did was the very Christmas holiday special season, and then we have to take some break. But here we are again. And today we got something not very advanced or not very basic, but still start from basic to get somewhere to the advanced. So the topic is about getting back to the basic, where basically we will learn like what is telemetry, what's the story of Grafana, like why people need to use Grafana, what are visualization, and topics like logs, metric traces, which you probably heard a lot like in many conferences, or probably a buzzword for you if you are may or may not be that much uh, I would say advance in the observability field. So yeah, these are the things which we'll gonna take a look today. And today I have the usual suspects. So first I will introduce myself. So my name is Usman, and yeah, I work in the Grafana Labs in the dev advocacy team. And joining me today as a co-host is Matt Ryder. Introduce yourself.
Hello. Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Matt Ryder. I'm a principal engineer at Grafana Labs, working on the Grafana Assistant, which is our chat AI, and the other agentic work. It's a very interesting space, and we use a lot of telemetry to make it good. And we've also got Carl.
Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Carl. I'm a principal engineer in the Grafana department. So I've been shipping Grafana to the world in various different ways for 10 years now. I just celebrated my 10 years anniversary at Grafana Labs, which is pretty insane.
Wow.
It's like a fourth of my lifetime I've been working on Grafana.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
Yeah,
Congrats. Yeah.
Many
thank you.
congrats, Carl. Yay.
Yeah. It's amazing though, because you really you and the team that were there in the beginning really built the foundations on which we're all building now. So yeah, it's a lot of appreciation for all that stuff you've done, Carl. And it's true if you look at, and I think I've probably talked about this before, but if they ever show old photos of Grafana people, Carl is in every photo.
Yeah.
I have my way of sneaking into a lot of them.
Carl, is it true? I really do not know. Also, did you also just started after Torkel, like, or very close to it?
He created a project like a year before I joined. So he was doing that as like a solo man show. Then he convinced me to jump on the train. So we used to work together before Grafana Labs as well. So it's been, I guess, 15 years working with Torkel. So it's a long time. It's a long, long,
That's
long time.
impressive.
Well,
I
something's
mean, it's
working.
been a quite an awesome journey, and very, very happy to see what we built.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
That's definitely true.
yeah. It's amazing, really. And it's funny to think of Grafana starting out really just in the open source project, not really just, but like as a visualization tool. And that's something that I think we've held on to really, like having these gorgeous ways of showing data. And basically like showing the data changes everything because you can look at the data in numbers, but and this is like I think really kind of key, but like visualizing it in all these different ways and all the sort of visual clues that we can put into that. I feel like dashboards are here to stay, even though we have a lot of like, I'm working on the assistant, there's a lot of agentic stuff going on. Because we didn't want the wall of text, we use all the Grafana visualizations. So the assistant actually looks incredible, I think, thanks to all the work that's gone into all these various panels and different visualizations that over the years. And people commented on this. One of the big AI companies said that it was the best looking use of their models that they'd seen to date, and
Oh,
that is really big credit to Grafana, the Grafana
that's
team for that.
something. That's
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
Oh
And
yeah.
and and I must add also here that the story of Grafana is also not just like us, but also a lot from the community. These dashboards, panel, and different visualization, they also have like a journey, and the journey also being part of the community, like they have really made some really suggested some nice feature improvements or those add-ons which for example, we at Grafana maybe didn't know like maybe we should or not, but the use case the community defined really add into it. And currently, I think in the market, if we look, Grafana stand as one of the most powerful open source tool, which is like available in various visualization. And I have tried a few, but to be honest, for me, Grafana is the top pick choice.
Yeah, the community definitely been a key part there, as you mentioned, because there's no way we could have done this if Grafana wasn't open source. Like all of the data sources and panels, a lot thanks to the community, and like we're using Grafana for so many use cases. No way we could have done it without open source and the community.
No way, right? And Torkel was scratching an itch. And the thing about having this in open source and letting everybody just kind of use this is they'll have their own itches that they need to scratch. I think it's how many contributions are there in the GitHub repo? There's like that would be worth knowing, only because that is hard to manage. Like having suddenly lots of interest, or even like people contributing plugins and different visualizations or different data source support, all this stuff. Everyone needs different things. It's a credit to the team that have been able to sort of marshal all that energy into something. And then as a user that comes along quite late to the game, I get to just use this fantastic library of components and stuff to build the new experiences, new applications and stuff. So yeah, it is kind of great.
Yeah. And I was just like, when you mentioned about the GitHub part, I was just looking. So we have like the core Grafana repository. We have already like 72K stars, right? That is massive. And this is just, we are talking about the single core Grafana. We have like Grafana Loki, Grafana Tempo, like we have those other sub repositories as well, which are also like major part of our projects. So this shows like this is the love from the community. So that's why, as Carl mentioned, like without it, we probably not be at this place right now. So big thanks again to the community.
Yeah, thank you everybody. So once you've got beautiful dashboards, what do you then put in it? What do you put in on those dashboards?
Good question.
Yeah. What's the answer?
I think my guess will be like, when you have the dashboard, try to make it more useful, but maybe what kind of data? That's more the question. And data is something which we need to know what kind of data we are feeding into Grafana. And for that, we have to take a look. So yeah.
Yeah. So this is
Shall
where...
I?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah. I was just saying, like, shall I share my slides?
You can do, but I thought maybe before that we could just chat a little bit about what do we need? What do we use it for? Like what do you put in the data? What is the graph showing? Because this is back to basics now. So like let's assume that we're teaching this to somebody and this is their first time in tech or whatever they're doing. They don't know really anything. They're brand new. They've heard metrics, logs, traces, profiles. But what is this telemetry? What do we need it for? Is it just because it looks pretty? Because it does.
Yeah, it does.
There's a bit more than that, isn't it?
I mean, the whole reason Grafana came to be was kind of to help our previous company to figure out how the system was behaving, but also how certain part of the business was behaving. So we started using it for monitoring various queues. That was like the first dashboard we created because we had problems with the queues. But we quickly saw that the customer support team were interested in the same numbers because they wanted to see how many unanswered issues they had right now and how many was arriving. So they was the second consumer of Grafana right away. They wanted to understand how their system behaves. We wanted to understand how our software behaves. So it's really about like gaining more information so that you can make better decision, regardless what kind of decision you're trying to make. It's not always like about incident response. It can be anything. Same for home automation as well. Like what's the temperature in all of my rooms and like what's the power usage everywhere. So, sometimes it's just not to make a decision, obviously. Sometimes just for fun. But when it comes to like the business use case or then like help you make decision is the way I phrase it. Help people become better.
Yeah, so that's great. And I think the temperature is an interesting example there. So if we think about telemetry, metrics is one of the big ones. And a metric is just basically a number over time. So it's just a number that has a timestamp with it, and it can be just set to something. So temperature is nice because you might have it in the morning, it's cold, and then it gets warmer, and you start to see the graph pick up a little. And it's a peak at midday or peak at 4 p.m., whatever the peak of temperature is, and then maybe it starts to come down, and in the evening it's very cold. And so you could visualize that. That is a metric that can be then visualized on a graph. So that's a nice example of something. Now, I think the key thing of telemetry is really measuring that at a distance. So it's like maybe you've got multiple rooms and you want to know the temperature in all of those rooms in multiple buildings. And so suddenly you don't have to just look at each one, but you could look at them aggregated together. So you could now say for this people in this house, this is the average temperature, because maybe that's enough to know that at least the heating's working. If that average temperature drops to zero or drops too low, maybe the heating's broken. So it kind of gives you some information about something at a distance. So I think metrics. Are there any other good examples of what we use metrics for?
So I think the
Um,
two most common use cases there, like temperature is gauges, as you mentioned. Then we also have counters, and you can deal with them a little bit differently. So for example, the most classic one being one HTTP request. Then you will count that upwards, and then you then have 10 servers, all of them counting the number of HTTP requests, you can summarize the fleet of servers, how much they are processing at any given time. So you can start to think about how your fleet of software or servers are behaving based on these HTTP requests. Then we have other types as well, but counters and gauges, those are the most important ones to know about.
And one classic example is also like coming from my background of like in cloud and tech support, especially for Linux. The classic example is like you are running out of like disk space or memory and CPU usage. And as a human, like what Matt says, like we cannot memorize every numbers, right? We need a way to represent those number in like in a dashboard panel in a graphical form. And this is a good example because when you have like a farm of servers clusters, like nowadays, like everyone is using Kubernetes and tools which are powerful but also sophisticated. So there you can use these options to have like a metric like how much memory is consumed, how much CPU is being utilized, and how much disk space you have. So you can have like a complete overview of your infrastructure basically in a single place. So you don't need to look like here like multiple places. You have like a single place or single pane of glass, which we always say through a dashboard.
Yeah, that's a really good point, I think. And this sort of like if say for example you have one machine that's running the stuff, that's actually quite easy to manage. But rarely do you end up with just that. If you have a successful project, you likely have many machines that are going to be needed to be doing their work, and usually you'll spread the load across all those machines. This is how something like Amazon would work. So you go to the website, and then it will direct you probably to one out of many of the same kind of thing running, and then that can serve your request. And of course, then it can, if you're counting how much traffic you're getting, and how much they can deal with, or you're looking at the resources, you can notice when they start to get a bit overwhelmed, and then you can take action. You can add more, usually horizontal scale. So you add more servers, and then they can deal with more traffic. Similarly, that might drop down. If you have spikes on, say, Black Friday or something, it might also drop down the other way and be less busy, and then you can tidy up resources and save some money and stuff. So you can see the value of having insights into what's going on at scale and also at a distance, because of course these things run all over the world as well. And then one trick that I like to do, and we do, is when we deploy a new version, so we're working on something and we think we've made a better version, we sometimes just deploy it to just one region, or just to one little group. And then we can compare them and we can see what did our change, what impact did our changes have. And if those machines that you deployed to, suddenly the CPU, the memory or disk space or something starts to spike, maybe there's something wrong with that we weren't expecting. Sometimes when you work on things locally, it works on your machine, but when you put it into the wild, the environment's very different. People are able to interact with it. You've got AI bots and all sorts now interacting as well. So it's nice to, it's sometimes unpredictable. In fact, it very quickly becomes unpredictable, which is unusual for what are essentially pure logic machines. I've never quite grasped why that. I mean, we know why, but it's quite funny, I think. So then if you've deployed the new version and you can see how it's behaving, sometimes we'll do work deliberately so that we use less memory because it's then cheaper. We can check on the graphs to see if that's the case. You deploy it and look, in this region of these machines running the new version, the memory's dropped down by 5% here. So we know that then what we did made the impact that we wanted to make. So they're sort of nice examples, I think, of how and why we have metrics of things like this that we're counting and gauging and measuring.
They're also very cheap to store compared to other resources, and that's worth remembering. Sorry for interrupting you, Usman.
No, I was just about to say the same. And but I have now a question. Like you both explained really well. So now we know some knowledge of metrics. Then the question is like what kind of tool we should use to measure these metrics if we talk about like creating a visual representation of it.
I mean, time series, always. I also like the state timeline chart, but obviously time series being the most popular one in my head. The gauge panel is getting a new update in Grafana 13, so that's something to look out for because it's gonna be better, smoother, better looking, and that's always important, right? Like people like to look at things that look nice. That gets people attention.
Yes, I think so. It gets. I don't think so much anymore, but it did used to get underestimated. Really, how important that is.
Yeah.
I remember Torkel, I think, was on a flight and started hacking on those new gauge things because I remember he sent me a load of different screenshots of all the different versions of it, and they were just. It's very exciting just to see that. But actually, the real value is the data. But yeah, so you mentioned time series. So I feel like that's something we should explain. What is time series, Carl?
Oh, a series of metrics over time is probably how I would phrase it. I never thought about explaining that, but that definitely is worth explaining. So graphs are probably what comes to mind as well. But the power of seeing these numbers over time can be very, very high. It's also allows the brain to like see patterns very quickly and identify things. I think that's one of the cool things with dashboards is how quickly you can identify the root cause or what's going wrong by just seeing things over time. Because the brain is fantastic at finding like something that is a little bit different or something that is not how it used to be. Like if you just look at the dashboard every day, 10 seconds, you'll see these outlines quickly. I mean, LLMs are getting better and machine learning jobs are getting better at this, but the brain is still amazing.
Yeah, the brain is amazing at that. And it's true. I think that's why visualizing the data matters because we've got a lot of software or hardware or firmware or what do they call it? Slushware, whatever. Like we've got a lot of that we're using really when we look at this, understanding landscapes and stuff for like humans like needed that ability and so developed it over time, and now we are kind of using the same thing. So the time series, I think it's a good point. So it's basically like if your servers are running, they will tell you, won't they? Or do they post the information, Carl, or do we go and grab the information?
Oh, that's a good question. So that depends on what database you're using or time series database. But let's talk about Prometheus because that's the one we are focusing most on. And in the case of Prometheus, an application would expose various metrics through an HTTP endpoint, and then the Prometheus server, where all metrics are stored, go to all of these web servers or devices and fetch them every given interval. So I think its default is 30 seconds or 15 seconds. I don't remember. So the Prometheus sends a lot of requests to gather the data and then store them in one central place. And then Grafana goes and query that central place. And Prometheus is like the default standard here for monitoring. Once you start to have many servers, you're gonna need to, or you might want to look into other alternative like Mimir, so you can have one centralized place for all these metrics. That allows you to reason easier about what's going wrong and query the data in just one place. Prometheus is great, but it's going to cap out at a certain size, and also it's one machine, and Mimir is a distributed system, so that's going to be easier to scale. But I don't think we need to dig into those differences now. But I think it's worth knowing the benefits of having one place of metrics at least. That's going to make things easier for you long term.
Yeah, for sure. So that's clear then. So you have the thing that is basically asking all the machines, what's your CPU right now? That's the now is the time bit. So the now is like the timestamp, and then you have all the values that you get given back, and that's then the x-axis on the graph. So this is how you show something changing over time. So yeah, I think that makes very clear. There's some fantastic links that Usman's putting on the screen for documentation for the intros and some of the learning insights here. If you've got access to Grafana Assistant, you can also you ask it as well. It's actually very good it knows all this stuff, and it's very good at answering those questions as well.
I feel like I need to mention something else here. Like there's also our more official way of sending metrics, and that is our agent Alloy, which allows you to send metrics to Mimir or Grafana Cloud. It feels weird to not mention that in this case. So there's various ways of getting metrics.
It's true. Yeah, it's like... Yeah, go on. Sorry, Usman.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry if I interrupted, Matt. Carl, you made a good point, but I think Alloy maybe needs a little bit more introduction because if I also, being honest, I know what Alloy is, but it took me time. So I will try to explain this to the audience, like what Alloy is and where it fits with Prometheus. So before Alloy, we used to have some different tools, and also at the same time in the tech industry, everyone probably heard or may also been used the tool called Open Telemetry, which is basically to collect all the telemetry data, which is like a vendor agnostic tool. Grafana has also this capability as well, which is basically in the tool called Alloy. And it is totally 100% OTel, 100% compatible. So you can use it definitely. And it also gives you the exporters options as well. So you can use Prometheus exporter, like you have to define in a certain pipeline definition, like define in the configuration in a pipeline fashion, and use it for your to get all the telemetry data for your application. So it just not support Prometheus, but also support for logs, metrics, tracing, and even I think we are adding more features into it. I think the eBPF is also part of its integration or will be. So yeah, correct me if I am wrong somewhere on the Alloy part.
No, but it's fantastic, and I think like people need to know really that we're describing the very basics here, but really to do this properly at scale, there's a lot of work that goes in to make that happen, and that's really what Grafana Labs, Grafana Cloud is doing, and the other databases and things are giving people that capability to do it kind of properly. But you don't. I mean, just to get started, I think people shouldn't need to worry too much about that. Carl, you mentioned earlier monitoring, and we've heard also observability. Usman, what's the difference between those two? What is monitoring versus observability? What do we mean by that? Muted, Usman. I need to know what's the difference between monitoring and observability, please.
No.
Yeah, no, I can hear, or I can say also.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a billion-dollar question because this is something not even expert able to answer very clearly. And for that, I think I will now definitely share my screen so that the audience can also understand it better, and we can also try to add more information to it. So give me a moment, please.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
I hope my screen is visible, right?
No, it is
No?
not.
Nope.
Okay. Ah, yeah, I made a mistake. So now
Oh, there
it
you
should
go.
be.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there we see.
yeah. So let me go full screen. Yeah, we will come to the Grafana Con later, but just to give you the folks, yes, you still have time to register, but we will talk about it later. So right now, we first go to the question because this is a very good question. And yeah, we already cover a little bit about it. So now we will jump to the monitoring and observability definitions or the differences. So monitoring is basically to track or note down basic information related to particular predefined metrics, like as said, like CPU, memory. You can note it down, you can track it down, it's fine. And also it comes with other things, like when you have put a monitoring service, for example, for your CPU or memory or whatsoever, you put an alert. So basically you define a certain type of condition in the alert that if the CPU goes high at particular, like, or the memory is 70% consumed, send an alert to the responsible team. And then what happens is that you get the notification, and the first thought comes to your team or to the person who receives is like, okay, something happened, but what happened does not know. You have to kind of investigate into it. You have to find the root cause even before knowing what actually happened. While on the other hand, observability is a little bit more in depth. So observability means you are collecting all the telemetry signals. So basically not just metrics, but collecting logs, traces, and also there is profiling as well. And once you have this, then it depends like how you are correlating or understanding to it. Basically, tracing or the distributed tracing helps you to understand the relationship between multiple microservices, because the classic example is the payment gateway service. If something, for example, you purchase something and after just about to pay out, something crashes and you have to do it again. But on the backend side of that particular application, the administrator, if the tracing is placed, can identify like which particular service or uh, particular code line of code was not performing or caused some problems, and can map to the traces via spans and yeah, through that. And then it gives you more information why this is happening, because now you're not just getting an alert, you are getting the complete, like a waterfall model, we say in tracing. You have a full flow of the application, like from A to B, what happened during that, how many requests have been called, how many API services were engaged, and so on. So this is probably the best way to explain the difference between monitoring and observability.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So monitoring is really the what's happening, observability answers why. And it's using that data and making some use out of it, some pulling some information out of that data. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, and I think yeah, and we already talk a little bit about the Grafana part. So for viewers, if you are really interested, this is a cool link which I actually found out also while making this slide. So there's a story of Grafana. We have a complete page for that. So if you are really interested, like how Grafana came into play, definitely check this out. And shall I move forward with the slides?
You can do, yeah. I do want to talk about logs at some point because that's
Oh
another one
yeah.
of the signals which I think is, yeah,
Okay.
very interesting.
Okay, I think yeah, we have some parts of the logs as well in the slide, but I think the next slide is more about showing the visual representation of Grafana to the audience, like
Yeah,
how it looks like. Basically, what exactly we have talked about, that we have this beautiful dashboards which showing fancy graphs, and it looks cool, but uh, it's basically a tool for visualization and do the analytic. But behind the scenes, there is a lot going on, and I think this slides, I just wanted to mention like some of our dashboards uh, are being used in like by NASA or for example, in this case, this is from the International Space Station, and those dashboard we also have named them as Golden Growth Awards, which is again part of the Grafana Con, which again I highly suggest you, if anyone is interested, it's happening in Barcelona, try to register for it. Um, yeah, going forward. So yeah, this is basically what I wanted to talk about a little bit, and I think this is very important for the audience to understand that okay, how the Grafana works into it. So even if we first right now keep things according to the part of metrics, so basically on the top you have this visualization layer, and basically uh, the data is being queried through some sort of data source in your environment. And maybe, for example, Prometheus is a classic example for the metrics part. So you are using Prometheus data source, and you have some fundamental building blocks to use Grafana. You may be just using Grafana with Prometheus, and you can use like the LGTM stands for like log, metrics, and traces. And there are some other capabilities which are placed as well. It depends on, again, on your use case, and I think in the next picture it is more clear that these key capabilities define what you want to use. So if you're using metrics, again, you can put an alert. So we have capabilities for alerting and AI insights and so on. And above that, we have also some solutions for testing, observability, and IRM. And at the top, the everyone's favorite, or the Mets very highly favorite, which I also say, yeah, the Grafana Assistant is available to explain those queries in a more human fashion way and even generate reports. So yeah.
yeah, that's true. This is very good. Yeah, so it's a good point about the assistant because once you're using one of these databases to keep all your metrics in there, to query it to get the data out and to build these dashboards, you write these special queries, and they're their own query languages. PromQL is the Prometheus one. There's a range of others, and they can be quite basic. Like there are some simple uses of those, but to really get value, you're crunching data, you're mixing it. You might be doing some kind of calculations or aggregations on that data in order to get that into the visualization, and that can be quite challenging. And so, what's nice is the assistant knows how to do all that, knows how to write very complicated queries, so that you don't have to do that anymore. And you can also always open the tools and open the edit the panels that it creates and things, and actually see what it did. So that is a great way to learn if you want to dig into like what are the specifics, what's it doing, how is it representing this data in this way. You can learn about all that by using the assistant and then see what it does. Very cool.
Yeah, and I think one highlight also of the assistant is that like we talk about like what Carl said, like you don't want to like if you're even using for temperature, like you don't want to just sit or monitor for the one room, you have like an entire fleet of rooms or temperature or servers. Like it can be any example, right?
Yeah.
So in these cases where you have like multiple servers or multiple locations, the Grafana assistance can be very helpful to like generate a report or try to help you to identify the root cause, because once like we have only two eyes, right? We can see certain data but not all of the dashboard panels or all of data in it. So assistance is the right tool to get that visibility which we may miss or may not be visible to us completely.
Right. Yeah. So we kind of covered metrics, I feel like.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to say on metrics in particular? I feel like we've gone back to basics on metrics and we've given people a decent enough start. If they didn't know anything about metrics, I feel like you got a good idea now of why we have this.
Yeah.
But what about logs? Logs are
What
kind of
about them now?
different. Well, logs are my favorite signal. But Carl, as you mentioned, metrics are kind of small data because they're just numbers, so they're quite cheap to store and transmit and things. Logs are literally lines of text that your program is printing out, and that's a really strong observability signal that I think most people probably are familiar with. Most programmers, you hear this a lot, that the hello world is really just it's the first bit of observability you do just to make sure that your program is built and is executing. It prints out hello world. That's a log, and it's not a very useful log. It tells you that the program's running, but imagine if you were saying like, the user is looking at this product and here's the product ID, and they looked at it for this amount of time, or they tried to add this product to the shopping cart, but there was an error, and here's the error message that came back. And so logs can really contain anything, and it's just anything can be just printed out by the program. Now, I quite like structured logging. So structured logging is you basically it's still printing out text, but they're especially formatted where you have key value pairs. Some people do JSON as well, and I know Grafana supports all this stuff, all these options. But sort of JSON's quite difficult to read for humans. I like structured logs because as a human you can read it quite easily as well, and it's very machine friendly too, so it can be parsed out. And so then in that case of a product, you might put the product ID, so the key says product ID equals, and then you've got the value there. Then if you get that into Loki, suddenly you could look at all the logs that relate to a particular product ID by filtering on that field. And we have the drill down apps, which is our open source visualization for looking at logs, does all this for you. It just kind of looks at what are all the possible things you might be able to see from this log data. I'm going to show you all of it, and then you can at a glance and you can drill in from there, and see. And again, as same, it's really like, how do you what do we mean like by showing you the logs? Because we're not showing the raw logs. You do see the raw logs in drill down, but you also see these little graphs which show you like basically the frequency that is occurring in the logs, that particular thing. So for example, if you imagine like all our products are equally popular, you would expect to see all the product IDs have more or less the same kind of activity. If one product became suddenly really popular, perhaps it appeared on Keeping Up with the Kardashians, to use a modern reference, and suddenly everyone's interested in that product, you would see that spike up in the graph, and you'd see that now looks different to the others at a glance, just by looking at it. So that's extremely clever, I think, where logs are kind of turned into metrics for you. And of course you can always go back and just look at the raw logs themselves to see what's in there. But Loki doesn't index everything, does it? You can't just search all your logs just for any keyword. That's right, isn't it? And why is that?
So when an application logs something, it gets shipped off to a Loki cluster, and we need something to identify what application wrote those logs. So that typically means there's a job or a server or a cluster label attached to that log stream. So in order to query something, you need to know where the log stream came from. I think you can do some nasty hacks with LogQL to query all log streams, but that's typically not how you want to use it. You want to know logs from some source, and then you as an operator can decide how much of the log lines you want to index, because that is gonna have performance impact when it comes to querying. So by default, you want to go with like maybe cluster, maybe namespace if you're using Kubernetes, and maybe what application name. And that is typically enough, because what Loki allows you to do is to first query through these labels and then process the pure text to filter down the results even more. And so that is like something you have to tune back and forward sometimes, how much you want to index or not. But the default of just using applications is typically enough.
Yeah.
Application name of some sort.
Right. Yeah. So the idea is like it's too slow and it's too expensive to be able to just search through all logs, because we're talking at scale. Like even one program produces a lot of logs. So I love the way that Loki works. You essentially, these labels, which are kind of like key value pairs that are attached. They're like metadata that you attach to it. Let you say things like, here's the namespace, and you can use it for application specific things too. You can have like application labels and things like this. Something
that is important here, I think, is that if you were to index everything, you're gonna get into a position where engineers need to make a decision: is this important enough to log? And I think that's something you want to avoid. It's better to just keep logging and pay the cost of traversing more text when you query. Because if you find yourself in an incident, then you find like, no, I didn't log this critical information. And like, obviously that happens when you don't know you would need to log it. But if you have to constrain yourself, you're going to find yourself looking back in time and say, oh, I should have logged that. And that's not the situation I want to be in, at least.
And I also want to add one more point. So there's always this debate that we can index everything. It will be much faster to search. There are debates like, and the difference or the comparison in the performance is really minute. Like, imagine if you have an incident, you really do not go in those details like, did we search this a few seconds earlier or later? You just want to have access to the search to the right information for root cause analysis, right? So Loki, what it does, like as we talked, that it indexes the not the entire line, but the information like the metadata. And I have seen cases or the tools as well where you can have the option to index everything, but the cost is very high, because then you need some heavy storage requirement on your server where you will store all this information. And what happens is that users are using your application, so they are generating tons of logs, right? By the time it will automatically eat up all the disk space, and you will run into issues where you have no more space, and the tool itself will give you problems that it cannot do the indexing and it fails. And imagine if that happens during an incident. You do not have the tool to get started because it cannot index, and it's giving you that error or warning that I cannot simply start. So these decision matters a lot, and I think Grafana Loki, on the other hand, makes the right choice not to index like everything, but index the information which is really critical and make it work. So that's I actually wanted to add there.
Yeah, and I think so. This idea that it's done in a way that is performant, and you can index everything, but it's extremely expensive, and most of the time you're not using it. you only really need it sometimes. And so Loki kind of is a nice balance there. And I think, yeah, credit to the team really that built it. They did a fantastic job. And then, yeah, we could talk maybe a bit more about the drill down apps in a bit, but these things essentially, they kind of hammer Loki. They almost DDoS it. Not quite, but it did it in the beginning. Like, I think people were surprised by, the approach, because essentially like making loads of queries in order to just show you kind of as much as we can. And then it's easy to just scroll, and that can also make loads and loads and loads more queries and things. And luckily, the Loki team, they're up for a challenge always. And so, like, genuinely, as engineers, some of the problems that they have to solve are just so niche and very specific, and it's very impressive to see them doing it. So I have a lot of because what they did is, in response to us DDoSing them a lot, is they sort of fixed it. They figured out ways to make that also okay to do that. And there's a lot of work that goes into making these things performant and things behind the scenes. It would be a nightmare if you had to solve this yourself, even if you just like even vibe coding it. It would take you a long time to vibe code Loki and perform as well as Loki does. That probably goes for all our databases.
I mean, you raise. I know it's a little bit different topic, but when you talk about vibe coding, so I recently tried to do vibe coding for an application and tried to tell the AI to generate like a dashboard for this via Loki. It was not as simple as it looks, because you really, I mean, maybe the agent was not so clever or updated, but there's a lot of details which you may miss, like how you put the query to get the information. So, and I think, yeah, we will come to the point where the Grafana drill down is really helps you to eliminate all those problems. So, yeah.
Yeah, we have a question on logs, which is a good one. You maybe want to flash it on the screen. Would it make sense to treat logs as time series at some point? And I think this is kind of what the drill down apps do. They are showing you over time the frequency of certain attributes from the logs, from the labels, but also from the actual logs themselves, if it can extract that meaning automatically, which it does brilliantly. And it turns it into time series. Every time you print a log line, it has a timestamp, so that you know when that log was written. And so in a way, that is kind of time series data. So like then aggregating that and looking at that data, visualizing it, you get such interesting insights. One example we saw, we were demoing the drill down logs app, and somebody was having they were just having a bot was basically spamming their servers, and they could see the big spike on the particular attribute that was the same. So obviously the attack was kind of randomizing the request, so it's hard to spot. But I think something in it, like the user agent or something like that, was just consistent. And so immediately in the drill down app, you could just see a big spike for this one particular thing. And then the person just had to go and put in a rule to block that particular issue, and the attack stopped. They were able to block it. So that was done by turning logs that would have just been, otherwise you're just looking at a massive stream of text, which is quite hard to then see those kinds of things in that. You'd have to really notice, oh, this user agent's the same. I noticed it lots of times. But turning that into time series, so then you just see it as a line, and then the insight is just immediate. And it's that time saving, I think, that makes it's a great example of why you would turn logs into a time series.
Sometimes you want to create long time ranges as well. So if you want to have something over a couple of months, it's going to be quite expensive to query that through Loki. So having a recording rule that takes Loki queries and then turn that into metrics means it's going to be easier to track that over months, years, and so on. So whenever you have something you want to track over a long period of time, convert them to metrics. But always starting with logs makes a lot of sense because that's like an non-decision. Like this might be useful in the future, and then you can go create the metrics recording rules later on.
Yeah. And so just from like a programmer's point of view, just for any agents listening, because they're the only ones doing programming these days. So to write a log out, you literally say print, basically print this string out, and you might make the string from different variables that you're collecting around, which makes sense. How do you report a metric? How do you actually say that you're counting something now or you're tracking something? How do you report that?
So there's a Prometheus client library that you call. So there's different functions you call on that library. Typically like increase or add or set a value. So you have a time series, you create a time series in some way, and then you call these functions on that object.
Yeah. They then store it in memory, I think, don't they? And then when the collector comes to ask for it, it just says, yeah, here's the latest that I got from all over the program.
Yeah.
And this is where you explicitly in code go and say, report this number. Here's the name of it. This is the value, whatever the operation is. And so you do that consciously and explicitly. And it can be extremely powerful. It doesn't always have to be CPU and things. It can be application things. I mean, it makes a lot of sense if it's products sold or products added to the shopping bag. That might be something you want to track, and things like this. Yeah. So, and that is so powerful, just even having those things without all the rest of the stuff that Grafana gives you.
Yeah. And I would like to also share a screen, basically to show the audience like how what you can do with Grafana Loki. So basically, it's a collection of dashboards which are available live. So let me share my screen. So this is the homepage, or I would say this is the homepage of Grafana Play. So the Grafana Play is basically an online platform available for everyone to view and see how Grafana works. Basically, you can play with it, even modify it. And here in the search, basically, if you just type Loki, so you probably see a folder named Demo Loki. If you click it, you will get this very detailed, or at least this one is not working. Let me have a look again if I landed in the right one.
And this is at play.grafana.org, isn't it? So anyone can go and try this and play with it. Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see. Oh, yeah. So we have two actually. Let me see if I can pull at least one right now. Yeah, perfect. This one is working. So this is exactly the question about like converting into time series or how to treat logs. So these are all Loki-based dashboard panels, and you can see that the data is coming from an HTTP and Nginx server, and
Usman,
you can do.
I don't think we're seeing the dashboard.
Oh,
did it open in a new tab?
Yeah, my bad.
Yeah, it's all right.
Let me remove
it.
it.
Doing a bit of observability for you. Live human observability.
Human in the loop.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
It's nice to still be relevant.
Yeah. Yeah, I think now everyone can see, right?
Now it's not showing anything.
Oh yeah, I have to click here as well. Yeah,
there
perfect.
You go. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is basically the examples, like we have dashboard examples and we have this Loki Nginx service dashboard. So what we were talking about, or the question from the audience, that how to treat logs in a time series. So you can do, depends on your use case. We have, for example, one panel here, which is about, basically you can see the request. We are getting the get request. So we have a request section in this panel. We have also a section which is depends like on the geographical location, which are the top countries accessing this dashboard, for example, from different location. and you can track each and everything. This is the KPI dashboard, and if you go further down, you can also see more details. So this basically gives you an idea how or what you can do with Grafana Loki. You can even do the templating or creating variables if you have more than one servers and you want to get the data. So for example, right now it is selecting the all instance, but it can be more. In All right, I would say maybe I'm not picking the right, yeah, here. So we have multiple data sources. So depends like what data source I select here, it will slowly filter out or give you the right option. So this one only has one, but you can do and play around with it to get idea. And if you want to really look more into it, so basically just hover on this panel and click edit, and now you can see that the data source is Loki. The dollar sign here means it is like dynamic, so it's loading what we have selected from here. And this is the query. So yeah, this is the query where you define like what you basically want to have. Um, I'm not super expert on Loki, but to give you some idea, basically you define some certain labels, what kind of labels you want to uh, measure or view in a dashboard, and then put some aggregations and define what kind of visualization. So here it's stat. You can see or select the suggestion options, which can give you different options based on the data type. So not everything will be visible, only those options will be visible, whatever the query supports. So this is definitely very handy.
Yeah, I would say. Because remember, all this data comes just from strings printed out in the logs. So, it's able to understand that unstructured data, or if it's even structured logs, and turn it into this. And I think that's a great example that shows that some of the power of this. Of course, you can do this for any information that you need to track and visualize. It's phenomenal. The Yeah, go on, Usman. I was going to say, do we want to talk about? We're kind of running out of time. We may need to do part 2 of this because we didn't really
Yeah,
talk about traces and profiles yet.
yeah, we can talk a little bit about traces at least so that we have a complete chapter, but I think profile we definitely need to do part 2 of this one.
Yeah. You also showed a data source. I wonder if you could give a quick overview of what a data source is.
Yeah, so I think for that I can share the screen again, and so I need to go back here. So go back home, and we have this section of data sources. So for viewers who simply do not understand what is a data source, so basically Grafana itself, as we have seen, that it doesn't do anything. It needs a source of data. So basically the data could be coming from a server, and the server might be running something different. Just give me a moment. I am running also off my laptop battery, so let me hook it up before it shut down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's another thing you could
perfect.
be monitoring.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
have the
that's
monitor
one
placed,
thing.
so yeah.
Yeah.
So so data source is basically a way to connect your data to Grafana, and we have many data source options available. So here are just a few examples, like what you can do. You can do the GitHub, Influx. InfluxDB is very popular. We also have Infinity Data Source plugin, Postgres, MySQL. And if you really want to go and take a look, so my advice will be go to the grafana.com/plugins page, and you will get this complete catalog of all the data sources we have. Simply select the type data source, and there you go. You have everything in a single place pick what you are using for your project, for your work, for your environment. And if, for example, interested in InfluxDB, you will also get all the details, how to install it, check the repository, or report issues. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. But I do recommend using Grafana's databases if you're just starting out.
Yeah.
Because you do, we're able to build the user's experience and the back end to support that kind of at the same time, and that means they end up just being more powerful. You can do more things. They fit more naturally into the ecosystem, and they tend to be like the first things we implement. So they've usually the implementation of whatever it is tends to have that first and early, and therefore gets tested more and used more and things. But there is fantastic support. I mean, this is one of the great things of Grafana is you can pull data in from anywhere and represent that data. So yeah, data sources very cool. But do use the Grafana ones. It would make sense. It's just
Yeah, I want to make one note here. The good thing, most of these data sources like are owned or maintained by Grafana Labs themselves, and these are available on every instance, like for open source or cloud. So that is a good thing. Why? Because if it is owned by Grafana Labs, and if you run into some issues or you have a feature request, our engineers will take a look into it, and you will probably get the bug fixes or improvements within certain timelines. So that is really good thing, because there are some data sources which may be available, maybe not that well maintained. So that's the key point what Matt is saying, and I totally agree here.
Yeah, very cool. Should we give a quick overview of traces then? Because in a way you could say that traces are kind of like logs, but they're grouped together. Maybe we
They
could
follow
describe it
a
like that.
request.
Sorry?
They are logs that are following a request. That's how I can
right. So this literally happens often. You go to some website, it hits the server. The very first time, and sometimes even in the browser, it's already done this. It'll generate some unique ID, and that unique ID is used to then it's passed through and propagated through all the places where anything you cause to happen in your system passes the same ID around, and then anything that's reported or tracked has that ID with it, and then you can later say, given this ID, show me everything that happened. And so this is a great way to filter out all the noise from, like, I'm talking about distributed tracing here, like filter out all the noise and show me everything that happened because of this one request. That's useful because it may be that the user said, oh, I tried to add the thing to the shopping cart and it didn't work. And sometimes in that report, even when you say that report an issue, we capture the trace ID there as well. So that then you can actually look at the specific thing of what happened when this thing went wrong, when the user reported an issue. And it kind of also visualizes quite nicely, doesn't it, Usman?
Yeah, I just share this. So basically, we have also built in support for traces. We have our data source called Tempo for tracing. And exactly, it tracks with a unique trace ID from point A to the point B, basically once the whole transaction is complete. And this is what you see here in the screen share. You see like a water flow model. So how the request is started and where it ends. So once you have this visibility, then you can understand about your application or your infrastructure much better, that what is the problem, what's going on. So traces basically completes the whole picture, because logs and metrics, they are good at certain point, but if you need more information, especially if you are using a microservice environment or services which are talking to each other very quickly or with a rapidly, and you need to track what is exactly going where my request is flowing. So this is where traces comes super handy.
Yeah, and in this case, everything's took 300 milliseconds, and that's why it looks all nice and it's neatly placed there. In reality, you end up with these are all slightly different, and actually sometimes there'll be one of them that is just massive, and that's usually where the problem is. So you see immediately, again, just at a glance, you sense, look, it spent a long time doing this thing. Why is that? And then you can dig in there and look at the logs, and you might find something like we have it's either making an API call to a server that's just down, or a third party thing and it's taking a long time, or maybe there's some logic just in this one case for whatever reason it gets into a weird loop where it just wastes loads of time. Things like this, like some reason for some reason when something is slower, it shows up very nicely in here, and you can compare it to other things and see, well, why is this slower? What's unique about the slow things? Because those slow things we want to make faster. So that's, I think, a very clear mission for why you would have tracing, and understand, even if you just want to, like, whether you're doing an optimization to make certain bits faster. I mean, that's actually a great use case, because it's very common in engineering where, we like to optimize code and make it really fast. It's very satisfying work. Sometimes you see people doing that where they don't really need to, doing work optimizing things and making it faster. But if you looked at the actual tracing, you'd notice that's already not really a bottleneck, and you might have a big bottleneck somewhere else where something like caching might really speed things up. And so this is just gives you that information from which you can then make decisions.
Yeah,
It's good, isn't it?
Yeah.
it's lovely.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can spend like it's just so fun to splunk around in traces and see how we can improve things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just, like, I know we are running short of time, but this is exactly where Grafana comes handy with the drill down. We have talked a little bit about the drill down. The cool thing with the drill down is that if you have instrumented your application correctly for tracing as well, then you can get all this data automatically. So all this data which you see, the graphs and the information in this table panel, that is coming automatically via the drill down apps, and you can check about its status, like where what take this request the from the parent to the parent span and the child spans, and see all the spans and see the particular details. So this is pretty handy, and saves you a lot of time, because writing these things manually is really takes you up to a very steeping learning curve. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is good. I feel like we did a good job here touching on a lot of the basics. We learned about metrics, logs, traces now. We talked about why monitoring and observability are different, and why we need telemetry in the first place. So yeah, I think good job. And I if you've got any other questions, do get in touch. We want to help you figure all this stuff out, don't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, feel free. You can always ask questions, even if this video is live. You can always ask question in the comments. We will try to answer, because the comments will be later saved on the YouTube page as well. So you can also take a look into there. Yeah, I think that's a wrap up for today. So thank you again, both Matt and Carl, for being a wonderful host and experts on today's topic. I think I also learned a lot as well about the tracing and the logs and metrics part, especially from where we started with the why we need telemetry, and how we can get all these things together in a single tool, which is Grafana, which is an open source tool, by the way. So you don't need to really go or look other community tools. This is great, and we have some amazing feature of Grafana assistance as well, which we also talk about how it can help. So I think it was a great episode. We will we will say goodbye for now, but we will be back again next month. So stay tuned, and till then, take care. Bye bye.
Thank you.